you can't have this kind of a disconnect where the political representatives are so beholden to an ideology or any viewpoint that is becoming increasingly toxic to the body politic at an exponential rate.
So recently, former Congressman Matt Gaetz exposed the cold, hard truth about Israel's influence in the U.S. and in our government, the ramifications of that, how that impacts our foreign policy, and most interestingly, he sheds light upon his AIPAC trip where he was taken as a young congressman to Israel. What was the purpose behind that, and what were his experiences? And it looks like they were pretty eerie. So let's get his take on that. This is in a conversation with Glenn Greenwald. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel.
This is a movement, the Trump movement, that decided to call itself America First. And the argument was that we have been financing and funding and arming wars all over the globe that really don't have anything to do with us. Members of Congress make pilgrimage to Israel more than every country in Europe and Africa combined. They're constantly in Israel. And, I think we're also getting to the point now where a lot of people are starting to ask, like, wait a minute, we were promised America first. Why is every politician that I'm listening to constantly in Israel?
The leadership pushes you. I'll tell you why. I went on that AIPAC trip. I went on subsequent trips. And there is an actual downward pressure from the leadership and even the committee chairs. Like if you're on the Foreign Affairs Committee, if you're on the Armed Services Committee, if you're on the Intelligence Committee, there's like an expectation that you go there in some sort of like, I don't know, congressional Hajj. And I remember being I'll never go back. I was at the King David Hotel, and I rolled back to my room unexpectedly when the rest of the group was still on some planned activity. And there was some dude in my room. I'm like, hey, man, what are you doing here? And he acted like he was associated with the hotel and taking an inventory, but had no clipboard. And so, yeah, there's a lot of reasons why they want members of Congress over there. And it is ideologically to steep them in this notion that the protection of Israel is of great import to people in America. But it's really not that important to voters, and that is becoming more clear on the right and left. So like we've talked about the actual policy. Let's just get into the raw politics.
All right, before we get into that, man, there's a lot to say, but isn't that creepy? Were they bugging his hotel room to kind of gauge his interest in Israel or Israel's government or how closely attuned to it he was? Just to have a dude in your hotel room on your AIPAC trip, there's so many weird abnormalities about that, and I don't blame him for being spooked out. Now, to what Glenn said about America First, yeah, that was the cornerstone of Trump's campaign, but more and more it manifests as Israel First, not only when it comes to bankrolling the genocide in Gaza, but also shelving U.S. interests and coming to a peace agreement for a new inspections regime with Iran for the sake of joining Netanyahu's desire to bomb Iran and get into a war with Iran, which I promise we haven't seen the end of. The same is true about getting involved in Libya and Syria. It's this Israel first mentality. It's so pervasive and toxic in our political environment. And yeah, voters don't care about this nearly as much as the Washington political establishment, and that's because of the power of the Israel lobby.
I maintain that the true legacy of Netanyahu is that during his control of Israel, he has successfully made this a politically divisive issue on the American right and left. And like when I was growing up, it was a pretty bipartisan thing to have people generally supportive of a friendly relationship between the United States and the only democracy in the region. And now on the left, it is a major issue in primaries. Do you think it will be on the right? And like, are we in the cycle where in 2028, maybe on the Republican stage, maybe on the Democrat stage, maybe both, like you're going to see definitively anti-Israel candidates running for president saying, nominate me to lead this party and I won't make us subservient to Israel?
Wow, man, I hope so. I don't see us being there in 2028. I think that this is a trajectory that will take longer to pan out. But the phenomenon is being realized. We can see it play out with our own eyes, with Marjorie Taylor Greene calling this a genocide, with Thomas Massey blowing the cover off this by saying every congressman is assigned an AIPAC guy on Tucker Carlson's show. You can see figures on the right like Candace Owens and Dave Smith and Steve Bannon talk about this issue in a way they never have before in any niche on the right outside of, say, Pat Buchanan and Ron Paul, both of which, by the way, were heroes about this. But this is still a bipartisan issue. AIPAC lays claim and supports on their website right now 361 congressmen who they say they support. And what does that mean that they support them? Well, it means that they vote in favor of whatever Israel wants to do no matter what. And you can't tell me that, no, AIPAC is a domestic lobby. They just want a closer relationship with Israel. Well, then tell me which issue they lobby for that is contrary to what Israel's government wants the United States to do. They can't tell us.
And nobody else on the stage will say that. Like,
it has to happen, Matt. It has to happen. I mean, I'd like to see what happens if anybody who says that actually gets close to the presidency in the United States. There are going to be a lot of very powerful interests who are going to be very frightened if that happens. But the reason why I say this has to happen is because the polling data that you reference is extremely clear. Every single demographic group in the United States has now, as a majority, views Israel unfavorably, except for conservatives over the age of 50 or Republicans over the age of 50, which they're still clinging on to this sort of, they've been indoctrinated going back to the Cold War about Israel. But young conservatives in particular are the steep downward is very, very steep. It's the incline downward. And you're obviously seeing major voices in the conservative movement, in the Trump movement, Marjorie Taylor Greene being one, you being another, Tucker Carlson, Candace Owens, Steve Bannon. I could go on and on and on. You even have people at the Daily Wire now, like when the Israelis attacked a Catholic church, on purpose, saying, wait a minute, like, I'm going to get off this train now.
Yeah, think about that. The Daily Wire, both Matt Walsh and Michael Knowles, to some extent, have criticized Israel for that. And Matt Walsh especially, even to fund Israel. I mean, this is a breakthrough, man. This is the Daily Wire. That's a neocon establishment formed by Ben Shapiro. And you have voices there talking about this. I mean, this is a sea change. You're watching it play out. Things aren't as they used to be. Of course, the Israel lobby still holds power, but I think it will be waning for exactly the reason Glenn said, is because it's usually only older conservatives, as a generality, that support Israel. And that's not a blanket statement. I know there are older people that watch this that do consider themselves part of the right that don't fit into that box. But man, the support for Israel is waning and waning. I think that's a great thing.
So there's only so long that you can sustain a gigantic breach in public opinion on the one hand, and what the members of Congress do, and especially in a primary, where if you have growing sentiment, that I wouldn't even call it anti-Israel, I would call it more like opposed to the idea that we're supposed to be tied at the hip to this foreign country. And, younger conservatives have not been steeped in this. Israel really hasn't been talked about for the last 10, 15 years. This is really the first time a lot of people are getting a look, not just at Israel, but at how the U.S. serves Israel. And it's really a shocking thing. People are watching babies blown up every day, babies starving, and the Israelis doing what they're doing in Gaza, but also bombing Lebanon and Yemen and Syria, and then cajoling us into helping them bomb Iran. It seems like it's the only thing that the DC class talks about. And as a Jew, I actually do worry about how this is going to spark anti-Semitism, in the sense that people are going to start to wondering, like, why is our government so controlled? Why is it so dedicated to this one country? And then also, I just want to say, Matt, because in some ways this is the most important thing to me. As you know, I was very vocal in denouncing big tech censorship, Biden administration censorship. I absolutely supported the lawsuit to sue the Biden administration to bring it to the Supreme Court, that it was a full frontal assault on the First Amendment to coerce and threaten big tech companies to remove dissent on COVID, Ukraine, the 2020 election. It's why I'm at Rumble, because they're a free speech platform. But what we're seeing now is a full frontal assault on free speech in defense of Israel. I mean,
this is true. There's special DEI carve-outs just for Jews on college campuses. This is the same thing that we had on the left, where I shouldn't say the left, establishment liberals and wokeness, where anything someone said would be greeted with, hey, you're a racist, or hey, you're a sexist, or hey, you're a homophobe. And, you know, that wokeness is pervasive now in the Republican Party, where it's like, to protect against those sort of things, you have to have special DEI carve-outs for Jews, despite the fact that if you look at demographics, Jews are more successful per capita than almost anyone else in the United States in terms of, you know, prestige, you know, places in academia, places in, you know, media, earnings, things like that. That is the case. Glenn's right about that. And he's right. What would we do if we really wanted to encourage anti-Semitism? Well, it's exactly what the U.S. government has done by these blanket checks sent to Netanyahu to bankroll this genocide, to bomb Iran, to pretend like there's nothing wrong with a foreign lobby in our country, AIPAC, and that they don't have to register under FARA like any other country. Imagine if there was a Russian or Chinese lobby, how that would be treated. They'd be traitorous, right? You can just hear the headlines right now. You can just see the headlines play out right now. Traitorous foreign lobby infiltrates our government. But not when it comes to AIPAC. Not when it becomes part of the Israel lobby and those endeavors. So yeah, Glenn's right about this.
The Trump administration is demanding a radical expansion of hate speech codes to wildly expand what anti-Semitism is under this new definition called the International Holocaust Remembrance Act, so that now
definition
on
is
major college
bonkers.
campuses,
that definition is totally bonkers. That definition.
you cannot. You're barred from saying. Listen, you're barred. Okay, this is a Trump presidency that was devoted to restoring free speech and opposing censorship. You are now barred from saying that you think that what the Israelis are doing in Gaza is similar to what the Germans did in World War II. You can say that about any other country. You can compare the United States government to Nazism. You can compare any other any other country you want on the earth. Just you cannot say it about Israel.
Yeah, and how many times has, say, Trump called a Nazi, or, you know, Biden called a Nazi? You know, everyone uses and jumps straight to the term Nazi because it's, you know, the worst attribution in many people's minds that you could possibly give to an evil person. You know, I think Stalin and Mao are probably worse, but that is true in the political zeitgeist. And he's right. States have rewritten their hate speech codes to accommodate this and say it's anti-Semitic. They conflate, obviously, anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism very stupidly. And they point this toward Jewish voices that are critics of Israel, too. You know, you've heard Norm Finkelstein and Glenn Greenwald sitting right here, and Jeff Sachs and Aaron Mate and Max Blumenthal and Dave Smith called Jew haters or anti-Semites because they don't happen to support the modern state of Israel and its atrocities. So exactly right. It's so absurd.
You cannot say that you think Israel is a intrinsically racist endeavor because it's built on the idea of Jewish supremacy. You can call the United States racist because it, you know, genocided Native Americans or whatever, or slavery. You're free to say that about your own country. You just can't say that about this, or China. You can say it about Iran, Peru, Indonesia, whoever you want, just not about Israel. And you can also not say that you believe that the Bible teaches that the Jews played a major role in the death of Christ, which is a teaching that many, many Christians for 2 centuries now have believed.
And it's in the Bible. The Pharisees agitated to it. Does that mean that, you know, no Jewish person can follow Jesus? No. He welcomed both the Jew and Gentile into his fold, but this is a basic premise of the Bible. So this is what they're doing to try to shove down our throats and enact hate speech laws. And I thought, you know, the conservatives, the Trump supporters were, you know, digging their heels in against hate speech laws. At least that's what I heard. That's what the rhetoric was, but not so much when it comes to critics of Israel, as it turns out.
I'm not saying you have to agree with any of those views, but how can you be banned, punished? How can this be off limits? You'll be fired if you're on the faculty. You'll be expelled if you're a student for expressing any of those views. There's a stranglehold on free speech in the name of this foreign country, not even to protect our own people, but in the name of protecting this foreign country.
When I was trying to get senators to vote to confirm me, they were giving me heat on this because I voted against some adherence in the House to this definition for those reasons you just laid out. Not because I want to give any comfort to the anti-Semites, but because we've just gone through what we've gone through with the Biden administration, where they get an inch and take a mile on censorship. And you look at a definition like that, and it's almost meme-ish. You're like, oh, well, how many products made in Israel do I need to have in my house to like prove that I am not a boycotter? What is a sufficient amount of lamb's blood to paint on the door with my allegiance to Israel?
It's so preposterous. You can criticize U.S. states. You can say U.S. states are guilty of great evils, but take a look at the political repercussions if you bash Israel, if you criticize Israel, or not even Israel. If it's U.S. policy toward Israel and U.S. aid to Israel, which is endless and is bipartisan, look at how you're treated. They're right about this disconnect. And I'm sorry, this is not something that Americans are looking past. A lot of Americans don't prioritize caring about issues like this. Sometimes when it comes to, kitchen table issues taking precedence. But this is something you just cannot unsee once you see it. And what the sweeping ramifications are for it is foreign influence in our government. For all the assertions that there's so much Russian influence in the U.S. government, well, guess where the foreign influence comes from? It's actually Israel, and it's actually Ukraine. That's the truth. It's not Russian. That was a farcical hoax. And to get people to believe that, despite, the truth and the facts, is unbelievable in and of itself.
And I'm sitting here getting grilled by the senator on this, who ultimately said they would have voted to confirm me. But I'm thinking to myself, who is having you ask these questions? Like you from some Midwestern state where this can't be like central to what your constituents want in an attorney general, but it is so in the forefront of their mind. And I'll conclude our discussion on the Israel thing with this. You can't have this kind of a disconnect where the political representatives are so beholden to an ideology or any viewpoint that is becoming increasingly toxic to the body politic at an exponential rate. This system will not allow that to hold, and you will start to see people emerge and say, vote for me because I will not betray you in this way. And when that happens, I think that, like Glenn said, some really powerful people are going to be pretty nervous about it.
They sure are. It's only a matter of time before that happens. I tend to think it won't be by 2028, but hopefully the power of the Israel lobby is diminished by then. And he's right. If this was foreign influence from a different government and they had this amount of stranglehold upon our government, I would feel exactly the same way. It's not about the fact that it's Israeli. I mean, it is in regard to the fact that it is U.S. interests that get tied so deeply into that. But if this was the same when it came to an Asian country or a European country that basically had this much influence, especially on our foreign policy, and we can see how it spills into our domestic policy in terms of DEI and hate speech laws and things like that, I would have just as much of a problem with it as I do now when it comes to Israel. That just happens to be the facts on the ground, is that Israel has so much more influence in the U.S. It's not just Israel. They have the most influence of a foreign government in ours, I believe, but also Saudi Arabia. I mean, the U.S. placated the Saudis to commit a genocide, or at least assist with it, in Yemen, where 500,000 people have died. The U.S. started a blockade against that country over a decade ago under Obama. It continues it today. Trump used one of his sole vetoes in his first term to keep that war going. There's a lot of Saudi influence in our government. There's also influence from other places, but Israel has the most, clearly. And it's unmistakable. You can't unsee it. Again, they lay claim to having ownership essentially over 361 congressmen and how they vote. And guess what? It is a bipartisan thing to vote for Israel. These two were right about the trajectory, though. More and more people are starting to, put their hand up and say, no more, enough's enough, especially when you make this movement, the creed behind it, America first, and you're going to say America first? I mean, I think that just becomes more and more laughable as we see these things play out. But yeah, I mean, I don't know that there's a great solution other than the natural demographics that are playing out. I do agree with Andrew Breitbart when he was living, and he said that politics are downstream from culture. And you can see where the culture is moving on this thing. The people on the right are not talking about this issue even the same way they did, 10 months ago. This is a sea change playing out. We're seeing it on the right. The dissident left has always been very good about this. I always try to give them credit. They've opened their eyes on this long before most people on the right have. And, hopefully this coalition will stand, because you can guarantee they're going to do everything they can to throw wrenches in it to stop it. They'll raise culture war issues again, immigration, abortion, things like that, to try to derail it and get people that would otherwise work together not work together, just like they did when Occupy Wall Street and the Tea Party movement sprung up. There was some overlap between the two groups, but that's when we got this mass injection from the culture war of abortion, immigration, racism, sexism, war on women. All that stuff came down the pike to derail those things and the agreements those two populist movements might have had. So that's where we're at. Really love to hear Matt Gaetz' take on this. He's pretty courageous, I think, to share some of these things, especially because he's still tied into a lot of people, in power. And to have Glenn as a guest is great. So I love this conversation. I have to agree with much of what they said, but I do want to hear from you. Let me know down below. What is it going to take to lessen Israel's influence in the U.S.? Do you agree with Matt Gaetz and Glenn Greenwald? And where do you see all this going? Let me know in the comments below. Like the video, subscribe to the channel. Also subscribe to OAN that has this show. I appreciate Matt for having it. And please consider becoming a YouTube member. If you click the join button below, you can help support the channel. And in return, I will give you access to all my videos before they go live on YouTube. And until I see you guys next time, no more war, no more debt, no more inflation, and no more empire. Peace out, guys. Catch you in the next one.